Okay, I see that.
Yeah, the transcript has started, so the recording has started. So I think you're good to go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining this meeting again. I appreciate your time, and I want to be very cognizant of your time. And I know some of you are in your workspace as well and serving as volunteers for this. So I'm going to really be careful about that. And I want to remind us of our purpose. And our purpose is to find a mutually beneficial collaboration between FNA and Volunteer Tennessee. So that's what our focus is. That's what our purpose is. And I've been considering just and talking to different people that I know that have a little bit more experience with this on the best way to go about it. So what I would like to do, and hopefully you guys will agree, and if not, please speak up. I think the best thing for us to do is to start out with looking at what's common between our two examples of the MOUs and bring those forth into our document, our MOU, so that we're not working off of either of those two, but that we're creating our own. And so I'd like to start the conversation with what are the commonalities of the two, or what is it that we feel like we can bring forward into our MOU. Does that sound reasonable? And then what I'd like for us to do after we find the commonalities and the things that we can agree on, then I'd like to start bringing up points that maybe FNA feels needs to be in the document and have a discussion over that, and maybe some things that Volunteer Tennessee, our organization feels like needs to be in the document as well, and just kind of take it point by point that way. Does that sound reasonable to you as a committee? Good. Okay. Good. So let's start. Oh boy, I'm trying to think the best way to do this.
Can somebody resend the link to Tracy Vanderveen to the meeting, because she's having trouble finding it and she's trying to get in.
Thank you, Amy.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Jim, okay.
Yeah, I'm sending
look
it
out. Yeah,
Thank
I'll let
you.
her know to look out for an email from you. Okay.
Okay. So let's look at one statement that is common in both, and that is that Volunteer Tennessee recognizes finance and administration and must follow the policies and rules that the Department of Human Resources sets forth. I think that was common in both. Is that something we feel like that we can agree to bring over into our document? In other words, that FNA has, through the Department of Human Resources and General Services, has policies and rules that Volunteer Tennessee follows.
Can I ask a question? When we're talking about our
Please.
document, which document is that?
Is that
the one that Jim drafted from the other MOU?
There's two documents at this time that we've reviewed, or that hopefully you've looked at. One is from Jim brought up as an example of an MOU, and FNA provided us a second one at the end of our meeting last time. So we're looking at those two.
So the one we're calling our document is the one that Jim took from the previous commission, I think from the historical commission, and redlined, correct?
I think you're onto something. Let's name these two documents right away. Let's name them so we can distinguish between the two.
And Terry, do you want me to share the shared documents with the group so that everybody's looking at the same thing?
I guess that, can you split your screen and show both documents at once, Jim?
I can probably figure out a way to do that.
Okay.
I might have to download the documents from the shared drive onto my desktop so that I can split them. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
let me share my screen and show you. So can you all see that it's essentially the web page?
No, we don't, I don't see, there we go.
Yes,
Now I do.
yeah,
Now I
we do.
Mhm.
Okay. So if I click on these links, it'll pop up in a separate tab that will then open up the document itself. And I might be able to split these tabs and have them both on the screen at the same time. So
Okay.
that's
So
so
that
that's
one that you just showed to us, the first one that you just opened up, Jim,
Mhm.
that is the one that that FNA has presented to this committee, correct? The draft MOU, this one right here
yes,
that we're
I
looking
believe
at.
so.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe so.
let's call that draft 1. I don't know, lack of a better name. Let's just do that way. We'll know what we're referring to when we talk about a document. This is draft 1, and then the one that you brought forward, let's name that one draft 2, so that at least we can distinguish between the two.
Yeah. Okay. So let me
Okay.
hop over to this one.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to insert draft 2 here. Sorry, it's moving kind of slow
That's okay.
in terms of yeah. Okay. So draft 2 and then draft 1. Okay.
Perfect.
Now again, I can potentially pull these tabs out and do a split screen that way. If you want me to try that, Terry.
I think, I mean, I need some input from this group. I'm sure there are those of you who've done this before, but probably the first thing that we need to look at is that beginning language. You know, the purpose, basically. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get them both on the screen at the same time. It may not allow me to do it this way. But yeah.
Okay.
So and which document do you want to be on the screen right now? The draft 1 or the draft 2?
Well, let's look at draft 2, and if you can scroll down to the first paragraph, this
Okay.
one, an independent state entity created by governor, the executive order, and VT has exclusive authority and control over activities and funds as governed by applicable state law. Can we look at the draft number 1 to see how close the purpose is to this draft? And again, you guys
Yeah.
jump in, please.
Hey, Terry,
Yes.
can I say that, I think we need to, when we're talking about purpose,
Yes.
that maybe we talk about purpose about, at the purpose of why we're coming together to draft an MOU. I think that's, what's the purpose of this MOU?
Mhm.
And so I think those can be stated in pretty broad terms, I mean, the purpose of this MOU is to bring together finance and administration and Volunteer Tennessee to be able to successfully support the mission of Volunteer Tennessee. I mean, that's why we're doing this. If otherwise we there's I mean, is there another purpose that we're doing this for?
Yeah, Tracy, I think we have that captured in what we're now referring to as draft 1. I think it's at the top. It says number 1 purpose. It says that. I agree with you.
Can you all see that? See draft 1 on the screen now?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's just black.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there's a lag.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I don't know for time's sake, I've read through both drafts, and I feel like the draft 1 agreement has everything that the draft 2 has, just formatted differently. I may be wrong on. I mean, it also has more than what the draft 2 has, but I don't know if others felt differently about that. But I felt like everything that was in there, minus the administrative service fees. That was the only thing I didn't see in the draft 1 that's in the draft 2. But I think everything else is in there. Again, I may be missing something, but
So if we're looking at draft 1 and the purpose is stated, specify and memorialize the administrative services and support staff to, well, it's gone now.
There's both now. I see both.
Yeah, I see them both. Uh-huh.
Oh,
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Jim's screen has
well,
it.
I'm looking on that screen because I think,
He got it for us, but not for him.
yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I'll make do.
Let's see if I can turn up my brightness.
I couldn't see the screen, and so I just went ahead and shared my screen.
Oh, maybe
Jim,
that's,
is that
yeah,
okay?
just,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just because Sharon heard, that's what's going on. So let me reduce that. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. That's what I was trying to do in the room, but it was not working for me with the technology challenges. But yeah.
Jessica, I wasn't picking up, you were saying draft 1 you think has everything that draft 2 has except for, you said administrative services piece?
There's this administrative service fee part that I didn't see in draft 1. Maybe I missed it, and I don't know if this is necessary or not, but that was the only thing I didn't see that was in draft 2 that wasn't in draft 1.
Yeah. In my read of draft 1, so a lot of that is, well, I mean, they're lumping it under administrative services. We broke it out in our draft 1 under what would be HR, Office of Business and Finance. I think we can get some of those numbers. I think what's important to flag is like OBF. So there's not a charge per se for HR other than that charge is split all across the department for headcount. And obviously that impacts Volunteer Tennessee because they're under us. I can dive into that more if you want. But the OBF one, I think, is where Volunteer Tennessee has the most administrative fee, and that is purely based on transactions.
Yeah.
So the more grants Volunteer Tennessee processes, the higher their bill will be for the year. If you have fewer grants, so that will fluctuate from year to year. And I think if I remember talking to Sarah about this, I don't feel comfortable putting in a set dollar amount each fiscal year because it does fluctuate.
Yeah. And just for clarification, the one that's on the left, again, that is just almost verbatim from the Historical Commission MOU.
Yeah.
And I just went in and changed
Where it said,
the names of who it was. And that's why I highlighted that stuff in yellow. It's like that section may not be needed, but I just wanted to include everything that was in their version so that this committee could discuss it and figure out what it wanted to do.
yeah, just one last thing to kind of mention there. I mean, we can get, if this committee is interested, the historicals on what those fiscal years have been. I think it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60 or 70.
Probably for OBF alone. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, we can, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a clause, but if we wanted to say that there would be a maximum limit that would trigger that we would come back together and discuss as a group, I would understand that. I just don't feel comfortable saying a set amount year over year because it does fluctuate based on the number of transactions. But I absolutely can understand that you don't want, Volunteer Tennessee wouldn't want that to, all of a sudden be 70,000 one year and then the next year it'd be 120 and not have some insider clarity into that.
Do we need to have that in our MOU? Does that meet the purpose of this MOU? Does this need to be a part of it?
Well, again, just I copied that in from the Historical Commission,
Mhm.
MOU just because I didn't want to leave anything out for purposes of discussion.
Mhm.
But I don't, and again, this is just my opinion. I don't think that that's been an issue. I mean, yeah, Volunteer Tennessee would not like to be charged any administrative fees.
As would everybody else.
As would every
Yeah.
state agency in the state. But I mean, it's a reality of being part of state government is that you have to pay other parts of state government to help you do your business.
Yeah.
Regardless of where Volunteer Tennessee was located, Volunteer Tennessee would be paying some administrative fees to somebody.
And I think the other thing, I mean, we make Volunteer Tennessee whole in that aspect of what is charged to OBF, we allocate in the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's
so
monopoly money
you
at
feel
the-
like it needs to
don't-
be in this document?
I personally don't feel like it needs to be, especially with the way that the roles and responsibilities are laid out. I don't think them, like Jim said, it's not been an issue. I feel like if we put it in, it's going to potentially create an issue because, like Adam said, it fluctuates year to year.
And Terry,
Are-
if you would, sorry, if you would feel more comfortable, what I can do is I can pull up like a 3-year, like over the last 3 years, what those charges have been and break them down based on what the actual charges are for, if you'd like that.
I kind of agree with Jessica. I don't think this needs to be in our document. Unless somebody feels strongly that it does. I want to continue to look at the purpose of this MOU, and I'm not sure. I don't know that it needs to be in it.
Are the fees documented somewhere else in a contract or in some other way, in agreement with all these agencies that are receiving whatever services that they're receiving?
So we have a rate structure, Terry, for FNA. So I think as Jim said, Volunteer Tennessee is not alone in the Office of Criminal Justice Programs. Obviously, they're a big grantee awarder. They obviously have more transactions. So yeah, it's the same. It doesn't fluctuate from group to group, but yes, we have a rate structure that's charged back to all of our agencies that use them.
Okay, so if there's already a structure in place and, um, you know, I guess if you disagree with their fees, then I don't know what happens at that point, but, you know. But
Well,
I don't see any point that it's taken care of somewhere else. Those things are set up, and if they're the same for everybody that uses these services, then it's the same for everybody.
and the committee can always go back. So what I'm going to do right now, Terry, if you're okay with it, I'm going to delete that section because if I'm hearing you correctly, I think you want to go back and talk a little bit more about the purpose and make sure everybody's on the same page about the purpose.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
And I, for some reason, and this is just me, but I think that document number 1, draft number 1, that wording to me is heavy. I'd like to see it clearer. The part where, let's see, where did I make that note? Memorialize the administrative services. I don't know what that means.
So jumping in, Sarah, feel free. I think memorialize is some standard language of it because this is an MOU. Like the intent is to memorialize what conversation we're having so that when I'm not in my seat, when you're not in your seat, et cetera, somebody can pick it up and understand. The administrative services ties back to exactly what's in the EOs, that FNA will provide administrative services and support. And I do feel like that is probably where we've had the most conversation and discussion over the last year of like, what does that mean? And this is to memorialize what that means. Sarah or Lucian, if y'all have other thoughts.
I think it's just sort of common term in drafting MOUs. We can certainly find another word, but
Well, I would like to see this as a little bit maybe broader and not specifically just administrative services and support staff. I'd like to see it that the purpose of this is to working together to find a way to support the mission of Volunteer Tennessee, because that's what we're here for, you know. And then whatever administrative services we just deleted the administrative service fee that we said we don't need that. I think then we can go through here with the purpose of working together and collaborative on whatever those issues are that we need to talk about with administrative services and other things. I think we might encompass some other things as well as that. And so that, so that we can always go back and say, well, we don't want to just talk about just administrative services, but we want to make sure that we talk about all those points that we can work together in bringing about the mission of Volunteer Tennessee.
I feel like this conversation's coming up though because of the uncertainty of what that meant in the EOs. Like that's what I thought this was for, was to kind of clear up what is FNA's role, especially as it relates to administrative services and the support staff, and then how that functions within Volunteer Tennessee.
I think those can be part of that. Those can be part of the discussion, but I think there may be other things too. So.
And I'll add a little bit to that as well. The intention of the purpose is to set the tone for what is inside of the MOU rather than what is the purpose of Volunteer Tennessee and what is the purpose of FNA. It is what is the purpose of these two groups issuing the memo of understanding. It's our understanding between the two entities.
It's the purpose of the document,
Yeah.
not the organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So Tracy, do you want to unpack a little bit more about what you think the other things are that need to be incorporated in here? If not, the
No,
administrative services?
I think our purpose, your purpose can be anything you want it to be. And if we want to add to that, but I think this needs to really spell out how we are collaborative. And
So can I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Could we go through the rest of the document and then after we go through that, come back to the purpose? Because I feel like, kind of like what Sarah said, the purpose really sets the stage for what's in the document. And I feel like a lot of what, at least in the meetings I've sat in, what has caused confusion or whatever is laid out in the document. I mean, it's 6 pages. It's pretty specific. And then after we go through that, Tracy, if there's other parts that you feel are missing, I think we can definitely discuss adding those and then figure out how that fits back into the purpose. But I feel like until we go through the rest of the document, it's going to be hard to alter the purpose without everyone being fully on board with what's in the full document itself. But that's just a suggestion.
My thinking is different, Jessica. I think we need to be very clear on the purpose before we get into the document, because that's what drives what's in the document, not what's in the document drives the purpose. That's my opinion, though. And again, I don't have the experience that you guys do, and that's why I wanted to start with the purpose so that we're on the same page.
So for me, speaking for me, I think it is clear based on the meetings I've been in. Again, I'm sure there's been a lot of meetings I haven't been in that there's other things that have been talked about. So that's the perspective I'm taking. Like, I feel like it covers what the ad hoc committee was kind of tasked to do and what this MOU is for. But
Mhm.
again, that's just my perspective. I don't know if Amy or Tracy feel differently, and if they do, then that's fine. We can start with the purpose. I think we just really need, if there is an altering to the purpose, I think there needs to be specific examples of what that would be.
Well, I go back to, the reason Commissioner Bryson suggested that we draft this, and this was this is a mutually beneficial collaboration. It's something we're doing together. So we're drafting this, and we're creating this so that these two entities can work together. And it's mutually beneficial for both parties. I think, to me, that purpose, and I'm an educator. To me, it's fuzzy for me. I don't know what that means.
So just throwing out an idea, I hear you in saying that. Are you thinking like to add on to clarify at the end to that the purpose of the document is to memorialize between the two parties the services so that they're both, successful in achieving their missions? Like, are you thinking something at the end of that sentence to like clarify why we're memorializing the administrative services in order to effectively and efficiently carry out the mission of Volunteer Tennessee? Something like that at the end of that sentence, or?
I think that, to me, that would be helpful, Adam.
Okay. I'm brainstorming out loud, so.
Well, one other thing that might be helpful, Jessica, if you could scroll back up to the top. So one of the differences between the one on the left. Yeah. One of the differences between the two documents is the one on the left. And again, this is just from the Historical Commission. I just copied and pasted. It has the whereas stuff, which is like the preamble before you get into like the meat of, and some of the stuff, I think that if I'm hearing correctly, some of the stuff that people feel like is missing in the purpose on the right is some of the stuff that's stated in the whereas statements on the left, I think, if I'm hearing what people are saying correctly. So it might be worthwhile to just kind of look at some of those whereas statements to see what people feel might be missing on the right-hand side that might be included in, on the right-hand side.
I do feel like that statement with draft number 2, which is on the left, as an independent state entity, that sentence there should be incorporated into the purpose.
So the problem with that is Volunteer Tennessee is not an independent state entity like the Historical Commission is.
But the commission itself is, I believe.
So, and that's, I think, captured under definitions of the commission that is Volunteer Tennessee was established through EOs and is administratively attached to FNA, which is direct language from those EOs. And then it talks about how members are appointed by the governor, which I think goes back to your point, Amy, of being independent. The members are appointed outside of FNA. I think the problem with that wording with the Historical Commission, where it's not as easy as like a copy and paste, is they were structured differently and were established in statute, whereas Volunteer Tennessee is not. And so we can't definitively say that Volunteer Tennessee, the commission, is an independent state entity because it's not a standalone entity.
Well, part of the confusion might be, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for folks, is that both entities are administratively attached to another department. So neither one of them are freestanding state agencies. Like, for example, the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth it's not attached to anybody. It's its own separate thing. And in this case, both the Historical Commission and Volunteer Tennessee, even though one was created in statute and one was created in executive order, they still are both attached to some other entity. So that might be, I think, where the confusion is coming from. It's like one is called an independent state entity. It was established in state statute. One is established in executive order. So the disconnect there, I think, is where I think maybe where we're at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the commission itself, under the executive order, was created. So I mean, that's in theory, if the department were sunsetted, the commission could continue. It'd have to be attached somewhere else. But sunset, just as an example, and not that it's ever going to happen, but if F&A were sunsetted, if F&A were sunsetted, the commission itself, there would have to be a separate process. And by sunsetting, that means every, was it 3 years or so?
For
Every so often, the General Assembly reviews every state agency and determines whether or not it should continue to exist. And if they call those sunset hearings. So in theory, the General Assembly at any time could get rid of a state agency. So my example is, if F&A were to be sunsetted, there would have to be a separate process to also sunset the commission, because that's established in executive order. And so it would require executive action to sunset the commission, I think,
Yeah, there's also a wind down process. So all of the other things that are attached to F&A during that wind down process, should we ever be sunsetted, would then be put elsewhere. Volunteer Tennessee would be put elsewhere, and others. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think the difference, and Lucian, you may need to weigh in on this one, and I think this is what Deputy Commissioner Farmer with DOHR was talking about, is the statute for the Historical Commission does establish it as an entity that has appointing authority, whereas the EO does not. It establishes the commission, but it does not establish it as a state entity with any sort of appointing authority, meaning hiring or firing. And the distinction there is the Historical Commission does have that appointing authority, but receives support from TDEC. And then Volunteer Tennessee does not have that appointing authority and receives the administrative support from us, F&A. So there are slight differences. Lucian, I don't know if you want to weigh in if I got anything wrong there, or any clarifying statements, but they are very similar, but slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's right, Adam, and that's the additional authority that's bound up in the independent entity terminology.
Yeah, well, and I think this is part of where some of the confusion came from to begin with, because the executive order does give the commission authority to employ staff. And in my conversations with Deputy Commissioner Farmer, she said per state statute, that is the appointing authority. But the issue here is there's another section in the executive order that talks about F&A providing the staff. And so those two sections within the executive order are somewhat in conflict. So, but I mean, that conflict, I don't think is what we're trying to resolve here.
Okay.
But I think that's kind of part of the root of why we're where we are right now, is to try and figure out how everybody kind of agrees on what to do about it.
Okay.
I think.
We're kind of back to, how we work together, how we decide that we're going to work together, and be collaborative in these little sticking points that we have. So.
Adam, you were brainstorming with the purpose over there. Did you come up with anything you feel like could be added on to that first section, or is everybody else okay with the purpose on draft number 1?
Sorry, was that talk to me?
Yeah.
No, I can. I can brainstorm some more. But the answer, no. You caught me not paying attention to my homework.
That's okay. No worries.
I was taking notes, but I was not brainstorming.
No worries.
I think we need to work on that purpose a little bit. I don't think I can't accept it the way it is because I think it needs a little bit more to it, you know?
Okay.
I mean, we
Amy,
could,
what are you? Sorry.
I think what's missing, well, you had a couple of good ideas to clarify at the end, you know, maybe add a little bit more, but I think the collaboration piece, it doesn't present as well with this, and we maybe need to rework it a little bit so it appears that way. I know we need to clarify everybody's role, but
Mhm.
you know, to Tracy's point, we might need a little more language that looks like that, and it's also got to focus on the success of the work that's being done by Volunteer Tennessee as a result. So I just think we need a little bit more finesse in there, maybe. Just a suggestion, Terry, because we don't want to put Adam on the spot.
Sorry, Adam.
We may want to have a little bit more time with that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe just kind of go through draft 1 to see if there's anything that stands out right now.
Okay.
So I don't mind it. Yeah, I think that's good. I don't mind to take another crack and with the team, but some of the key things that I just took away from what Tracy and Amy, you just said, with the intent of working in, collaborate, mutual success, Volunteer Tennessee's mission, I would throw in, you know, obviously we have to follow FNA rules and laws. That's kind of captured elsewhere, but is that some of the main points that you think are pertinent there?
Yes, I think you captured some of that, but I want Tracy to jump in.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I I understand this is a lot of legal language, and I get that. And, probably most of us in our positions, we have MOUs, and some of it is, very complex, and they're 30 and 40 pages of stuff. And then some of mine are real easy because they're a page or 2 pages. So we don't have a lot of legalese that we have to put in them. So I think this is an opportunity for us to show that we can be collaborative, and that and I think that's the whole purpose is. And then all those other little sticking points, like, yes, we understand, and it's in this document. I think it's in both documents that we understand that FNA must follow the policies of the state, and FNA, yeah, we have to follow those policies.
Mm-hmm.
I think we understand that. And if that's something that needs to be put in the document, then we can find, a place for that. And then I'm hoping that others will, whatever other sticking points that we have that, and struggles that we have come to, that we just work through them and kind of find a middle of the road to work it out for both agencies, because we're spending a lot of time here trying to do this. And in the end, if we're not successful, then we've wasted a lot of time here. So I hope everybody's coming to the table and wants to work together and wants to find solutions, and that we just don't spend our time just coming up with language that we're really in the end not going to agree to.
Can I ask a question? You've talked about collaboration, and I'm wondering if are you wanting more assistance, more involvement from FNA?
No, I don't think that's it. I think on I think there are some disagreement things, and that that the way things have been working in the last year or so, that Volunteer Tennessee, it's working differently than it has, and some of the things have been, I don't think, working well, and I think the Volunteer Tennessee parties have kind of disagree about how things have been happening. And so, obviously, and, there are sticking points. And so I think there are ways that we can take these points and say, how can we find a middle of the road to make it work for everybody? And that by doing that, by working together, that when we come to a sticking point, because we can't define everything, a year from now we may have another sticking point that we say, hey, how are we going to work this? So I hope this is more relationship building to both entities, and so that we can solve problems together, and be able to be open with each other to solving those problems, and so that we come away with a good working relationship, and that finally supports the mission of Volunteer Tennessee.
So I would like to add to that a little bit. I think for me, it would be helpful to kind of, if the point of the MOU is to kind of mend those sticking points and define roles and responsibilities of each parties, so that when we have a stick point, we can refer back to the MOU to kind of set the narrative of how to approach it. And so I think if we're going through the document and we notice something, and that's one of the sticking points that has been brought up in the past, that's what we can kind of address there and go through how that language can be different. But we've got to have those hard conversations of this is the language that I have a problem with. And then we can kind of have those discussions. Otherwise, we'll kind of focus on parts of it and not really get the purpose of the MOU out. The Historical Commission, if you read through that MOU, it is really setting apart, this is the Historic Commission, this is THEC's responsibilities, this is how we're going to work together, so that it's not just saying we will be collaborative, it's showing this is how we're going to be collaborative. And so I think kind of going through and pointing out what your stick points are with the language that's in draft number 1 would be helpful moving forward in this conversation. And knowing what Volunteer Tennessee has had frustrations with in the past, so that we can address it in the MOU moving forward, rather than encompassing it just in the purpose. Because the purpose isn't going to set the tone and set the precedent in the future. It's the meat of the MOU. But correct me if I'm off on that.
I agree with what you said, Sarah. So that means Amy and Tracy and Terry, that you guys have to be very specific in what those sticking points are if they're not being captured within the MOU.
Well, it sounds like that several of us would like to clarify the purpose further. And maybe that needs to be done outside of this time. But it sounds like that's something that we want to work on. But do we want to move on to the definitions, or do we want to continue talking about the purpose?
Well, I'm just going to say, why don't we move on and use the time we have to get started on going through draft 1.
Draft
But
1.
that's just my opinion.
So we'll come back and talk more about the purpose, and maybe do a little bit of brainstorming. Maybe Adam and I can do a little brainstorming on that if you feel comfortable, Adam.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at the definitions. Are we all comfortable with the definitions portion of this document of draft 1? It's on the right side.
The only thing that I noted, because 2.2 mentions members refers to volunteer commission members or VT commission members making up the commission appointed by the governor. There are members that are through the State Department, so I don't know if that's covered under the appointed by governor. And if it is, great. That was the only comment I had on the definitions.
Yeah, I mean, I can pull up the executive order if you want, but I think the executive order, it talks about the governor appointed members, and then it talks about the ex officio members of the commission. So I think in general, talking about members captures both the governor appointed and the ex officio, I think.
So maybe the language there needs to either add ex officio members, or because they aren't appointed by the governor. So that maybe we need to add that in there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that clause does say appointed by the governor.
Yeah.
I think we can clarify that on members encompass all members. Some members are appointed by the governor, and then the ex officio members are outlined in the EO.
Yeah, well, I guess one thing though, I'd throw it back to this committee is, do you want to make that distinction in this MOU, or do you want to just have the voting members be represented in this MOU as opposed to ex officio? I mean, I think it's fine to include both, but if you want to just say it's just the ones appointed by the governor, then that definition would capture just those that are appointed by the governor.
We could also, this could be controversial and y'all can tell me no. We could strike appointed by the governor and just say commission members making up the commission as outlined in EO 55.
Right. That would for sure capture both the
And
ex
then you don't
officio
have to
and the appointed. Yeah.
separate.
Yeah.
Good idea,
But
Sarah.
my point, and I haven't thought about it until just right now because I didn't notice that was in there. But if the committee wants specifically to point out just the voting members, then that language would be what you would want to use. But I think it's fine to strike that.
And that way you don't have to do a separation of
Mhm.
two.
Right.
Just kind of
Right.
point back to the EO.
Right. Again, because the EO does
Mhm.
talk about both categories of members.
Is everyone fine with that?
Mhm.
I'm fine with that.
Are the definitions, are there any other definitions we need to include here, or does that encompass what we want to include in the MOU?
I would just ask, in anybody's read through, did you run across a word that could be vague that needed to be captured in the definitions here? Like where we said VT or staff, were there other examples of a word that is pretty vague like staff that we haven't clearly defined here?
In my read through, I felt good about the definitions, and I thought I added something that was missing.
And some of that also is pull over from draft 2, how they in their whereas clauses stated
Yeah.
clearly what those were, just framed a little bit different, calling them definitions.
Okay.
Well, and one thing I'd just suggest as we go through the rest of it, if we see something
Yeah.
that hasn't been defined, we can go back
Flag it.
and
Move it up.
And add it.
add it in. Yeah.
All right. Shall we move down to 3.1, responsibilities of the parties?
In 3.2, the commission will vote on a chair and vice chair. It also votes on a secretary and treasurer to make up the executive committee. You define 2 of the roles, but you leave out the other 2 members of the executive committee.
So I'll kind of give you where my head was at with drafting this. I wanted to define those 2, but everything else is outlined in the EO. And so we can make a reference back to the EO, but I didn't want to just copy and paste the EO directly, but I wanted to do those main 2 at the top. and then circle back that everything else is included in the EO. But I didn't want to
Yeah.
copy and paste it, but if
Yeah,
we
I
need to
think
do
it's
something, we can.
I think it's important to include the entire executive committee because they have
Okay.
roles in a lot of different roles on this commission. So I really feel you need to add those back in.
Okay. Sorry, I just messed that all up. And I'll add it in.
Yeah, and I
Is it
think,
okay if I add it in a little bit later? I don't. have
yeah, I
to-
think Jessica's typing a
She typed
note
in the note.
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. That's why I wasn't
Yeah,
also adding.
I was
notes,
gonna do-
because there's three
there's
different
enough-
notes saying the
yeah.
same thing.
I get nervous with the track on. It always throws everything off.
Yeah, no,
Thank
that's
you.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I had on here and I took it off because, and this is more of a clarification point for me. Will this be updated on a yearly basis?
You mean the MOU?
Yeah. Is it something that's signed yearly, or is it signed and then if something changes, it's updated? And the reason I ask is because currently we put 7 full-time state of Tennessee employees as outlined in section 4. And I know that that doesn't regularly change, but Jim, if you guys were ever to get more funding or things of that sort, that
Yeah.
number may change. So I wasn't sure if there was a more general way of putting that, if we needed to be specific in that. That was the only kind of concern. I took it out because I wasn't sure about is it an updated as needed or on an annual basis? That was my I wasn't sure of.
I think we had something in your early draft maybe, and I had talked to Eugene about it, and he felt, and this is open for discussion, obviously, to not define and rather just revisit it as needed instead of us signing this every single year. That we update it as either party feels it needs to be updated
Yeah, and
or revisited, I should say.
yeah, and Jessica, you don't necessarily need to scroll to it, but both versions have a term section at the end. But now that I read it, it's a little bit confusing because it
Yeah,
says,
that's what I was asking.
yeah, it says the term of this memorandum of agreement shall commence on the date first written below, and it will continue on a year-to-year basis. So that's one version. The other one says the term of this memorandum of understanding shall commence on the date first written below, and it will continue on a year-to-year basis if notice of termination has not been given as provided in section 5. So I think the historical commission version essentially says, unless it's terminated, this keeps going.
Okay.
But the other version, the one on the right, I think doesn't have that termination language, so it's a little less clear.
We took out the termination
Yeah.
clause, so we didn't, this will not terminate unless the parties get together and terminate it.
Okay.
And to me, I thought the termination language was a little heavy.
Yeah. Well, again, it was just copied and pasted from historical commission. So
No, agreed. Yeah.
So maybe when we get to that point about the term, we just say continue on a year-to-year basis unless both parties agree to terminate or something. I mean, we can hammer out the language, but add something to clarify.
Yeah.
So I guess back to my question, the 7 full-time staff, if that ever changes, then the MOU could be revisited to update the number of staff. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. This also goes to the point of FNA's commitment of like, we are providing 7 staff to Volunteer Tennessee, and we have no intent of moving those staff around, reallocating them to accounts or budget or OCJP, that we're clearly saying this is the staff supporting the commission.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? Are those staff? So I'm assuming those staff are positions that have been created in the budget, regardless of where the funding's coming from. Because from my perspective, I have several staff currently under me that are grant funded. And even though they're under established positions, once that grant funding goes away, unless there's another funding source, like their position goes away. So that's not the case with these positions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the budget shows a federal column, a state column, so it shows the funding that, yeah, it shows the funding that comes from the feds, but the state appropriations is in a separate column. So if I understand your question correctly, I think the answer is no. To
Okay.
your question, I think.
Yeah, they remain.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're
yeah,
Jim,
they're
state
not-
funded
yeah.
positions.
Yeah, so they're not separated out where maybe there's 2 or 3 that only have federal funds in that line item and the 0 in the state appropriations. They're all together in a single line that shows both the federal and the state appropriations. I think maybe that gets more
Oh,
to
that's
your.
great. Yeah.
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 That's
Gotcha.
good for them. Yeah. That's awesome.
okay, it is 12:58, and I did say I wanted to be very cognizant of the time because I know some of you are at work. So I think we should stop there. I think it's a good place to stop. And Jim, if you will send out another doodle poll to find out when we can meet next, probably after the conference, maybe early March.
Sure.
And try, and I'd also like you guys to consider times that aren't necessarily during the workday, because I just want you to remember that some of you guys are at work, and this is a volunteer kind of committee. So the other thing I will say is maybe Adam and I can get together and look at that purpose and maybe do some rewording of that, if that's okay with you, Adam.
Yeah, of course.
And I added that to that document 1 notes
Yeah.
on that
Perfect.
that
Easy
purpose
takeaway.
section that
Okay.
Terry and Adam will talk more.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all I put in there. So it's not super descriptive, but
That's fine.
it's in the shared document.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all. And this might not be easy, but we'll get through it. And I appreciate us working together and listening to each other. I think that's really important that we hear each other out. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Everyone.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.